Seneca had a rule, one single rule, and he believed that getting it wrong was the single fastest way to lose a fortune, faster than bad investments, faster than bad luck, faster than anything the market could do to you. He called it judging before trusting, and almost everyone today does it backwards. Here's the test in one sentence, and I want you to actually answer it honestly before this video is over. If every dollar you have disappeared tomorrow, how many people in your life would still be there next week? Seneca wrote an entire letter about exactly this question, and one line in it is so sharp that it still stings 2,000 years later. We're getting to that line, but first you need the rule that comes before it, because without the rule, the line won't make sense, and you'll miss the part that actually matters for your money. This comes from a letter Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius sometime around the year 65, one of the most quoted letters he ever produced, called On True and False Friendship. It opens with Seneca catching his friend in a small contradiction. Lucilius had sent him a letter through the hand of someone he called a friend, and then, in the very same letter, told Seneca not to share anything important with that person. Seneca's response was essentially, you call him a friend, but you don't trust him with anything real, then you don't actually mean friend, you mean something else, and you're using the wrong word for it. That contradiction is the seed for everything that follows, a rule about who gets close to you, who gets your trust, and most importantly for our purposes, who gets anywhere near your money and your plans for it. Here's the rule itself, and it's worth saying twice because almost nobody applies it correctly. Seneca's exact framing, when friendship is settled, you must trust completely, but before friendship is formed, you must judge carefully. Most people run this exactly backwards. They meet someone, like them immediately, and start trusting in small increments, sharing a little here, relying on them a little there, without ever doing the upfront work of actually evaluating whether this is a person's judgment, character, and incentives deserve that trust in the first place. By the time red flags show up, the relationship is already established, already comfortable, and now backing out feels like a betrayal instead of just correcting an error you made too early. Seneca's order is the opposite, and it's deliberately uncomfortable. Take a long time, his actual phrase was to ponder for a long time, before deciding whether someone earns a place in your trust. Investigate. Watch how they handle money that isn't theirs. Watch what they do when there's nothing to gain from being watched. Watch what they do when there's nobody watching at all. But here's the part people skip because the judging phase feels safer to live in forever. Once you've actually decided someone passes that test, Seneca says to commit completely. Not cautiously, not with one foot out the door just in case. His words were to welcome them with your whole heart and soul, and to speak as boldly with them as you would with yourself. This matters enormously for money specifically, because here's what happens when you get the order backwards. People who skip the judging phase end up in partnerships, business deals, and financial entanglements with people they never actually evaluated. They just liked them. And people who do judge carefully but then refuse to ever fully trust, who keep auditing forever, who never let their guard down even after someone's proven themselves, end up isolated, suspicious, and unable to build anything with anyone because every relationship stays stuck in permanent evaluation mode. Seneca had a phrase for that second trap, and it's blunt. Half trust isn't friendship, it's surveillance with extra steps. So that's the rule. Judge hard up front before anyone gets access to you or your resources. Then trust completely once they've earned it. Simple to say, almost nobody actually does it in that order. Now here's where it gets specific to money, because Seneca didn't just leave this abstract. He gave an exact test for telling which of your relationships are actually built on this kind of trust and which are something else wearing trust's clothing. In a separate letter, Seneca describes a category of relationship he has almost no patience for, what he calls friendships of utility, people who befriend you specifically because of what you can currently do for them. His description of how this kind of relationship behaves is so precise that it could have been written about a modern business partnership that falls apart the second money gets tight. His words translated, a person who befriends you purely for usefulness reckons wrongly, because the friendship will last exactly as long as the usefulness does and not one day longer. He goes further, almost cruelly specific. Such a person makes friends with someone who might help them out of a difficult situation, and the moment that difficulty actually arrives, at his words, the first rattle of the chain, that friend disappears. Here's the test this creates, and it's the one I asked you to sit with at the start of this video. Seneca's diagnosis was brutal but useful. Prosperous people are surrounded by crowds of friends. People who have actually failed, who are in real difficulty, suddenly find themselves standing in what he calls vast loneliness, their former friends fleeing from the exact crisis that would have proven whether the friendship was real. Translate that to today, and it's not hard to recognize. The business contact who's enthusiastic about you when you're closing deals and unreachable the moment you need real favor with no immediate payoff for them. The friend group that's thrilled to be associated with your success and quietly distant the moment you need real support instead of reflected shine. The partner who was all in during the upside and discovered urgent other priorities the moment the downside showed up. None of this is always obvious in the moment, because fair-weather friendship doesn't announce itself. It just quietly fails to show up exactly once, at the one moment when showing up would have actually cost something. Seneca's test, restated for money specifically, don't evaluate your relationships by how people behave when you're winning. Evaluate them by how or whether they behave when you're not. That's the entire test. It costs nothing to run, and it tells you almost everything. But there's a deeper layer to this letter that's even more useful than just identifying who to avoid, because spotting fair-weather friends only solves half the problem. The other half is what you do with the people who actually pass. And this is where Seneca says something that I think is one of the single most underrated lines in anything he ever wrote.
Part 3. The line that makes or breaks it. Here it is in full. Regard him as loyal, and you will make him loyal. Read that again, because it's doing something most advice about trust completely misses. Seneca isn't just describing how to detect loyalty. He's describing how trust actually creates the thing it's looking for. His logic runs like this. When you treat someone, a partner, a collaborator, anyone you've already passed through the judging phase, as fundamentally trustworthy, you communicate to them that the relationship carries real stakes, real respect, real expectation. People tend to rise to that. Not universally, not magically, but consistently enough that it's worth building a strategy around. Then Seneca flips it, and this is the part that should genuinely unsettle anyone who's been burned before and responded by closing off. People who constantly fear betrayal often end up teaching others to deceive them. Constant suspicion doesn't protect a relationship, it corrodes it. If you treat every business partner like a potential thief, you create exactly the kind of low-trust, low-stakes, transactional relationship where cutting corners on you starts to feel justified because you never gave the relationship room to be anything more than transactional in the first place. This is the part where the trust test stops being about screening other people and starts being about your own behavior. Seneca's standard, and it's a genuinely difficult one, live and operate in such a way that you'd trust yourself with nothing you couldn't also hand to an enemy. Meaning, be straightforward enough, honest enough in your dealings that you have nothing to fear from full transparency with the people closest to you financially. Put the two halves of this together, and you get the actual test promised in this video's title. It's not just who would stay if the money disappeared. It's two questions asked together. Who have I actually judged carefully before trusting, versus who did I just let in because I liked them? And separately, am I treating the people who passed that judgment with the kind of full trust that tends to produce loyalty, or am I quietly auditing them forever, training them to expect to be doubted no matter what they do? Most financial betrayals, partnerships gone wrong, deals that fell apart, they trace back to a failure in one of those two questions. Either the judging phase got skipped, or the trusting phase never actually started. Close. So here's the full test, the way Seneca actually built it. Phase 1, judge hard before anyone gets close. Watch how they handle money, credit, and people who can't help them. Phase 2, once they've passed, commit completely. Half trust is surveillance, not partnership. Phase 3, run the fair weather check whenever things get difficult. Loyalty that only shows up during the upside was never loyalty at all. And phase 4, the one almost nobody applies to themselves, be the kind of person worth that level of trust, because the way you treat people is quietly training them on how to treat you back. Go back to the question from the start of this video. If everything you have disappeared tomorrow, who stays? You probably already know the names. The harder question, the one Seneca actually wanted Lucilius to sit with, is whether you've been treating those people like they've already passed the test or like they're still being quietly evaluated no matter what they do. That question about trust leads somewhere Seneca spent almost as much time on as money itself. What happens when you finally get everything you were chasing and it still doesn't feel like enough? That's next. Subscribe if you want to be there for it.